We've been joined in the kitchen by the chief choux bun expert. It's Max the dog. He has never had a choux bun and he never will. Sorry, Max. Sorry to break that to you.
Hi, I'm Donal and welcome to the channel.
I've been creating easy meals that make your life a little bit easier in the kitchen for over 10 years now. But this channel is all about a little slice of our family life and home cooking. I'll be showing you how to get the most out of your kitchen to next level your dishes for maximum flavor. So stick around, hit that subscribe button and let's get cooking.
Now today we are going to talk about one of my absolute favorite desserts. These are chocolate profiteroles, beautiful choux pastry buns filled with a Chantilly cream and doused in gorgeous chocolate sauce. They're something that just instantly brings me back to my childhood, and I remember trying them for the first time in an old Irish country house where they wheeled down a dessert trolley and you could choose the profiteroles or ice cream or jelly, or it was just one of those lovely little moments, and I've loved them ever since. And the great thing is that they're very easy to make. I say easy, but once you master choux pastry, it does become easy. And mastering choux pastry is what I hope to show you today. So we're gonna start off in a pan with some butter and some water. Now it seems like a strange thing to make a pastry that has heat applied to it, but this choux pastry is a classic one. And if you can learn how to make this, you can make a savory version called gougères, which has cheese running through it. But essentially what you're left with are these gorgeous little pastry buns that puff up magically in the oven and leave you with something that can be filled either with sweet or savory options. So water goes in on top of the butter, and we're gonna bring this over to the heat, melt down the butter, get it sizzling, and once it's sizzling, we're gonna add in our flour. So it all happens quite quickly, but before we do all that, I wanna prep the other ingredient that we need, which is some eggs. So I've got 2 large free-range eggs, and we're just gonna pop them into our bowl and whisk them up. Now with the eggs, all you want to do is give them a good beat up. The whole idea here is to gradually add the egg until you have the consistency you need on this choux pastry batter or dough. And I like to make sure that I have all the elements ready to rock. So with the water and the butter in the saucepan, we have our flour weighed out, and now we have our eggs whisked. So this can all come together quite quickly. Right, so eggs are whisked, we've got our butter and our water, we've got our flour, and I'm gonna need a wooden spoon, so to the cooker. Now, what I love most about a choux pastry dough, unlike other pastries, is that there is no resting time in the fridge. This all happens quite rapidly and quite quickly. So once the water comes up to a nice bubble and your butter has melted down, it's time to get in there with our flour. Grab up your spoon, give it a little mix along just to help it through. Okay, this is in a good place. So it's time to move quite quickly. We have the flour, which is weighed out. Pop that straight in. You're gonna mix this until you get a nice dough forming. And as soon as it's smooth, it's back on the heat to cook out completely. So you have to kind of work quite quickly and use a bit of elbow grease until it starts coming together. If you come in here and have a look, this is what you're after. It's starting to kind of form a sort of good, rich dough. And when it's at this point now and the lumps of flour are kind of no longer an issue, get it back on the heat and we're gonna cook it out for about 30 or 40 seconds, just until that kind of flour works its way out and you don't get that bitter taste. So it is worth getting it straight back on the heat. And a good way to know that it's done is that it starts smelling like cooked pastry, and that means that the flour is starting to cook out with the butter and the water. And literally, it only takes a minute or two, and that is done. Time for the eggs. So I love this moment in choux pastry making. This is where you have to be a little bit more delicate and kind of eyeball this. So I'm gonna add about half this egg mixture, which is essentially 1 egg. You're gonna get in there and beat quite quickly because you do not want this to turn into scrambled eggs. So you're gonna beat this, add a little bit more eggs, and then you should be left with a nice smooth dough that is kind of a dropping consistency. Now I've actually added a 3rd egg because sometimes with your choux pastry, it doesn't come to the consistency that you want. And this is why, you know, recipes are great, but eyeballing it and making sure it looks right is probably more important. So at this point now, we've got something that is a lot more kind of glossy, as you can see on the outside, but it's starting to drop in consistency, and that's really what you're after, and that's what you should be looking for with your choux pastry. And if the recipe says, which mine does, is about 3 eggs, you know, really eyeball it and add a little bit at a time until you have that right consistency. I'm just gonna add the tiniest touch more, and then it's into a bag so we can get it piped. Now, one really important kitchen tool in this scenario is a spatula. You will actually get every last drop of your choux pastry out if you use a spatula. And it just makes life a little bit easier, and it means that you've taken, I would say, the majority of that choux out of the pot. And there's nothing I hate more than leaving a little bit in that pot. So this is looking good right now. As you can see, I have a piping bag. I've snipped the end of it and I've placed this into a glass. So it means that it's easy to incorporate the choux pastry dough into it. So once it's like this, you're gonna unfold it and unravel it and create just a little piping bag essentially. These plastic ones are quite handy because you can literally grab and go. So once you have it at this point, we're gonna lay out our baking sheets with some parchment paper. Now, a little trick here to make sure that your choux pastry buns stay in place as you're piping them is to drop a little bit of that dough just in each corner of your baking sheet. And then when you take some parchment paper, you're literally placing it on top, pressing it down, and that little touch of choux pastry dough is going to keep it in place and ensure that it doesn't slide all over as you do this. Now that these are kind of stuck in place, it's time to create our little choux buns. So the trick here is just doing a little bit of a sweep and a swirl, and you should be left with a nice little round of choux pastry that's going to go in and bake in the oven and puff up beautifully. So let's get piping. So once you've made these little yellow emoji poos, choux pastry poops, you have a gorgeous tray of pastry essentially ready to rock. And the last little tip I would say when you're making these is to grab a tiny bit of water and just using your finger, you're going to tamp this down. This just ensures that you get a nice even top to all of these. So just gently press this down so you have no little peaks that might catch or burn. So once you've gently tamped down any little kind of protruding bits of choux pastry, this is now going to go into the oven at about 190 degrees Celsius, and it's going to bake off for about 15 minutes. And again, this is a sort of thing where you have to eyeball it. What you're looking for is a nice puff of these choux pastries, but they should also be a little golden brown. And before they go in, we need to brush them with a little egg wash just to give them a bit of color on the outside. So a little bit of egg and then straight into the oven to bake off. Now with our choux pastry buns in the oven, the next step is to create the cream that's the filling. This is a Chantilly cream, so it's a sweetened cream, and it's very simple to make. It starts off with some double cream in a bowl, or heavy cream, or whipping cream, whatever way you call it in your country. To this, a little bit of sugar, and alongside the secret ingredient, not so secret ingredient, but important ingredient, is some good quality vanilla extract. That goes straight in, about a teaspoon or a capful of that vanilla extract is going to go in there. And then you got to get in there and whisk until you have beautiful soft folds of cream. So once you've built up a little bit of sweat, you'll know that your cream is nicely whisked. And this is now ready to go. So I'm going to pop this into another icing bag, and we're going to get this into the fridge. You do not want to over whisk your weem. Your weem? Your cream. You do not want to over whisk your cream, because it's probably one of the worst crimes I ever see on the internet is over whipped cream. So please go gentle and stop when it's time to stop. This is like almost too much, but it's perfect to hold its shape into our little choux pastry bun. So just tamp it down. And now we're going to just bring up the sides of this, and with a little bit of cling wrap, we're just going to make this kind of sealed, because I want to pop it into the fridge to make sure it's super cold. Okay, so that is our beautiful Chantilly cream ready to rock. And now the last element of these gorgeous little choux pastry buns is the chocolate sauce. Now this is a bit of a Sheets chocolate sauce. It takes moments to make. So into a bowl or into a pot with a little bit of sugar and a little bit of cream. And now this goes onto the heat until we bring the cream up to a nice simmering point and the sugar is melted through. And meanwhile, we can chop up our chocolate. With the cream on the heat, it's just a case of chopping up some dark chocolate. So just a nice little fine chop. And the reason we're chopping it is so that we can ensure that that heated cream is going to melt it down, and we'll be left with a really, really gorgeous and glossy chocolate sauce. We've been joined in the kitchen by the chief choux bun expert. It's Max the dog. He has never had a choux bun, and he never will. Sorry, Max. Sorry. to break that to you. Right, we've got our lovely dark chocolate. Now you could do this with, normal chocolate, or like milk chocolate, or you could do this with white chocolate. The same method works to making a gorgeous chocolate sauce. So go for dark if you fancy it, but mix it up if you do too. So dark chocolate goes back into the bowl, and our cream should be coming up to temperature. So I'm going to grab that and get this chocolate sauce made. This chocolate sauce is that as soon as you add that cream and sugar mixture in, you're instantly left with something glossy and glorious. And to be honest, I don't even need profiteroles at this point. I could put that over my head and be happy for the rest of the afternoon. But that looks pretty much good to go. So we're going to use this to dip our lovely profiterole choux pastry buns into. So now it's time to assemble. I have them, which they've come out of the oven and they've puffed up, as you can see. I've let them cool on a wire rack just to ensure that they get kind of crispy on the outside and nice and tender on the inside. So now, using a little kind of poker device, you could use a knife or you could use the end of a spoon or something like that. So just create a little hole that's going to allow us to pipe in our cream. And the smell of choux pastry buns straight out of the oven is probably one of the best things in the whole wide world. So do exactly that with all the rest of these, and then let's get piping. Once they're filled, this is the really best part of making profiteroles altogether. It's taking some of that chocolate sauce, or chocolate ganache even, and spreading it over the top. Now I'm going to place these and serve them up, but this is the smallest one, so you have to try one. You have to see if they're okay. And you could leave them to kind of set in the fridge, and they're quite nice like that, but fresh out of the oven, freshly piped, chocolate sauce over the top. In fact, I'm just going to bite in. Oh. Oh. Wow, I actually haven't made these in ages, and they're so good. Just look at that. Cream, chocolate sauce, choux pastry bun, squeeging out. That's where the magic is, and you have to eat the whole thing. Oh, These I really urge you to make. They are like an instant kind of moment of nostalgia, and if you had these growing up, this is a really great recipe to follow and how to make. Now, if you want the full recipe, I will leave it in the box below. You'll check it out on my website. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and comment beneath letting me know what sort of profiteroles you grew up with. Maybe it was eclairs in your life. But either way, I hope you give these a go. I'm off to finish all these up, pile them up high and devour.